So, chapter 3 of the Discover textbook was called Strengths Finder. The two subtitles of the chapter were Traces of Talent and the Strengths Finder Profile. So, the first subtitle, The Traces of Talent, asks the question, how can you identify your own talents? So, the first step that the text mentions is to reveal and identifying your talents, that you have to monitor your spontaneous, top of mind reactions to the situations that you encounter. These top of mind reactions provide the best trace of your talents, but they also reveal the location of strong mental connections. So the best way that the text felt was to open up with a pretty strong example. The example was pretty drastic, as they stated, and it dealt with this lady Kathy, who was on a trip to the Dominican Republic with her computer software company, and they were on their plane. She kind of gives a description of all the employees and what they are beforehand. And the next thing you know, on the plane, the sirens start going off. The plane hits a sharp decline. People are freaking out, as they should. But the main thing that came about that was she sat back and just kind of relaxed while everyone was kind of in panic mode for the most part, but kind of picked up the characteristics and the other people's reactions to see their true character. One of the things that she found was that the talents that they did or exposed with their reactions matched their roles. One example that she gave was this guy Martin, who was kind of a funny, lighthearted guy, and once the plane started going down, he pulled out a small bottle of Smirnoff vodka and was like, "Oh, let me get one last drink before I die." Well, she used that to kind of match it with his success with his job, which was kind of forming relations with European partners and kind of building relationships that benefited the company. Another example was with the boss. He was kind of more of a very level-headed guy, really straight to the point, and he immediately was over by the cabin trying to figure out what was going on and how he could help. And that kind of showed that he had very leader characteristics. So, although spontaneous reactions provide the clearest trace of your talents, there are three more clues to keep in mind to help you identify your talents and what they are. The first one being yearnings, the second one being rapid learning, and the third one being satisfactions. So, yearnings kind of deals with the presence of a talent, particularly when they are felt early in life. So, it's something that you know that you've had for a long time. It's something that you knew right off the bat you were good at. Rapid learning, compared to yearnings, the talent is within you still, but it takes some time for that talent to come out. You know, something sparks that talent, and it's the speed which you learn a new skill that is associated with the newly found talent's presence and power. And then finally, the last one was satisfaction. This was slightly hit on in the last chapter when the text discussed that your strongest synaptic connections are designed so that when you use them, it naturally feels good. With satisfaction, it feels good when you're performing an activity, then the chances are you're using a talent. So, an easy one to deal with is sports, for instance. If you know you're a good shooter and you're shooting well, you know it feels good. So, the next thing going on in the chapter was the Strengths Finder Profile. And the question that came from that subcategory was, how does it work and how do I complete it? So, the first part, how does it work? To answer that question, the Strengths Finder Profile was designed to help you sharpen your perception. It presents you with pairs of statements, it captures your choices, and then sorts them, and then reflects back your most dominant patterns of behavior, thereby highlighting where you have your greatest potential for real strength. The Strengths Profile, it's a great way to kind of get a grasp of what you're good at and what you can elaborate on. But although this does sound like a great model and a great thing to bank your try to find your strengths, there are some complications that come with additional problems. The first problem is being that there are a limited amount of choices. So, you know, with every situation, you can have a completely different reaction, and as the text states, an infinite amount of reactions. So essentially, what the Strength Finder Profile does is, it can only give you a certain amount of options. Even 1 to 5 was too many options. So therefore, the strength profile can only give you 2, which that kind of hinders the deal, but you can still somewhat get an accurate description of the reaction that you're portraying with the situation. And that kind of leads into the second problem. The second problem is that they couldn't make the choices too obvious. So if you make a question that's obviously right or obviously wrong, and morally and just mentally you know that that's the right answer, your answers are going to be skewed, and therefore your strength finding profile will not be accurate to any degree. And that's not what you want. That's not the whole point of the thing. You want to answer these questions, these situations truthfully. So that leads into the next aspect of that second part of the question, which what will you receive from the Strength Finder profile? So the Strength Finder's purpose is not to point out exactly what your strengths are, but to find where you have the greatest potential for a strength. And that's where I think some people get confused with the thing. They get the results and say, oh, these are my 5 strengths, where that's just really not the case just yet. So what the Strength Finder will give you is your 5 most dominant themes of talent, but which may or may not already be your strengths, but instead they will show promise of a strength that you might have. So for instance, if you get something like a talent of happy or something like that, you're obviously happy, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't exactly mean because you scored happy on this test that you're happy all the time. But you have more of a chance of being a more outgoing person.